In order to write software, a developer needs some development tools. These tools usually include a text or source code editor, a compiler and/or interpreter, a debugger, etc. An integrated development environment, or IDE, is a software program that combines or integrates these things into one place, making it easier for the developer to create or develop software. As we are about to start writing code, in this lesson, we will look into IDEs. So we want to write or create software, whether it be a desktop application or web app, etc., that fulfills a specific task. The question then is, what tools do we need to fulfill this? Let's look at two common or general tools that we would need in order for us to write software. We would need a source code editor. First of all, source code is actually code that the developer writes to create the software. It is the source code of the software, hence the name source code. So a source code editor is simply a text editor that is specialized specifically for writing code or software programs. A source code editor can be designed for a particular programming language or a couple of programming languages. Often we can use a simple text editor like Notepad to write software. Let's demonstrate this quickly with Notepad. So as stated before, Notepad is a simple text editor that is used to create text documents. But as we will soon find out, it can also be used to create code. So first of all, how do we get to the Notepad app? If you come to Start and type Notepad, you should see the application over there. We click on it. As you can see, there it is. So say this is a simple Notepad document or text document or text file, whatever. Then to save file, save. Now you can save the document at any folder that you choose. In our case, for our tutorials, I decided to create this tutorial demos under documents. So we'll say a demo file. Save that. Now let's go look for it. I'll say documents. The documents, there's the folder that I created, and there's the file. Now that we have seen how we can access the Notepad app and we've seen how it's used to write simple text documents or text files, let's see how it can be used to write source code. Let's start with a simple HTML page. Now I won't be getting into the details of the code itself, as the main purpose of this is not so much as to explain the code. We'll do this at a later stage. The main purpose is to show us how we can use Notepad, which is a simple text editor, as a source code editor. So let's go back to Notepad. There we go. Just going to undo this. And then I'm just going to start typing or creating a HTML document right in front of your eyes. And do not worry, we will at a later stage get to explain, or you will get to understand as I will explain exactly what all these things mean. Title, a simple, what do we want to call it? Notepad page. Let's call it that. And Notepad web page. Okay, whatever. Body. Whoa. H1. I was created using Notepad. A bit of style, simplicity, color, red. Okay, that's fine. Now we're going to, in fact, before we did this, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to just copy this code and then say new file. Don't save. I'll paste this code, the code that we just wrote, okay, in the new file. So now when I'm saving this file, I'm going to say save as. You see here where it says text documents. You have to click there and change it from text documents, because we were not creating a text document. Change it to all files. And then we will say demo.html. So all web pages or HTML documents, which are the most basic of web pages, they have this extension .html. So now let's save it. Save. Let's go back to the folder. Would you look at that? We just created our first page. Now you notice how it says over here Chrome HTML document? Well, the main reason for that, if you right click here and you say properties, is because in my computer all HTML documents have been associated with the Chrome browser. You can change it and use another browser or use another application to open HTML documents, but I like Chrome, so we'll leave it as that. So now let's see what our document looks like. Double click. And there you have it, our very first simple web page or HTML document. You notice there's the text that we put over here. It has a bit of styling. That's actually CSS, by the way. That thing that you saw over here, this thing, this is CSS, but later on that. And as you can see over here, Notepad web page, which is what we had written in the title. So we've just used Notepad to write a simple HTML document or a simple web page. Now that we've looked at the first of the tools that you would use in order for you to create software, let's look at our second one, an interpreter or compiler. In a previous lesson, we spoke of how the developer's source code has to either be compiled or interpreted into code that the computer can act on. Let's consider the difference between the compiler and the interpreter. A compiler takes the entire source code and converts or compiles it into the instructions that the computer can execute when the program or software is running. In other words, when the program is being executed, it is not being executed from the source code, but rather from the compiled code. So before the program can be executed, the source code has to first be taken by the compiler and converted into some other code that will then be run by the computer. An interpreter, on the other hand, converts the source code during runtime, line by line, into the instructions that the computer can execute. Think of the interpreter as doing the translation live. That is to say, it translates line by line as the program is actually being executed. The browser actually uses an interpreter to translate HTML code into something that it can display when the page is loaded into the browser after the user requests that particular page. So for instance, when we opened our page, the browser interpreted it line by line in order for it to display it. Now let's look at a compilation example. We will do this by writing a program using a programming language that uses a compiler. In this case, we will use Java. Let's start off by creating a simple Java program that writes similar to our previous HTML page example. I was created using Notepad. So our simple Java program will print out I was created using Notepad. So let's copy that. Then we'll come over here and say file, new. All right. Public class, what will we call it? Simple program. Public static void main string. Now, of course, as was the case with the previous example, I will not be explaining everything, as that is not the main purpose of what we are doing right now. We want to see a compiler in action, but first we create the source code. So there we go. We've pasted that I was created using Notepad, and that's the instruction that says it should be printed out. Now, when we save it, Similar as we did before, we have to change this so that this file is not saved as a simple text file. Say all file types, and then we will say for Java you have to use the same name as you gave to that public class. So in our case it's simple program, so we will save our file as simple program.java. Don't forget this. Change this to all file types and then .java. Save. Let's go to the folder, and there you have it. It's a Java file. The type is Intellij because similar as we did before, all Java files, as you can see, .java files, they are associated with this particular application in my particular computer, Intellij IDE. And by the way, we will touch in a moment what an IDE is. Okay. Now, as we mentioned before, Java is a compiled programming language. So we cannot actually run this program directly. This simple program.java file, we cannot run it directly because this is actually the source file, or it's the file that contains the source code of this particular program. Before we can run it, we would have to first compile this source file into another file that the computer can then run. So the Java compiler is called JavaC, which I already have installed in my computer. In order for us to access this compiler, we'll have to take a little bit of a detour in exploring something that is called the command prompt. If you come over here to start again and type cmd, you will see this application called the command prompt. So go on ahead and do that. Start cmd command prompt. Click on it. You'll notice that there's this window now that is pretty much just a black background with white text. Then you'll notice that there's actually this underlying thing. That's the prompt which says it's waiting for you to type some command. So what exactly is this? You see, back in the day, the operating system was not what we're used to today. This whole thing of a mouse and this fancy graphics with applications and icons, basically a user interface or graphical user interface, what we are used to today, that's not how computers were back in the day. The operating system, which for instance Microsoft used, MS-DOS, it was pretty much like this. It was just text with a command line or a command prompt where you would then put in instructions. You will notice, for instance, here in this line over here, it says C and then users Zooks. That was supposed to be Zooks. That C is the C drive, or actually your hard drive, which in this case is called C. The C drive is usually the default drive in your Windows computer. So in the same way that we can see here, users Zooks, I'm just going to call that Zooks. If we go to what we are normally used to, and let's say desktop, and then we go to this computer, notice under this computer there's actually this C drive. You click on it, you'll notice that there's a users folder. You click on it, then you see that there's a Zooks, which has a bunch of things inside of it. So in the same way that there are folders, or you can navigate folders using this folder navigation structure, in the same way that you can do that, you can do the same in the command prompt. In fact, not only can you navigate, you can do other things. For instance, you can view the things that are inside that folder. So the command to do that would be dir. As you can see, dir is showing us some of the things that are inside this Zooks folder. Now let's navigate to where we actually stored our programs. To navigate to different folders or directories, we use the command cd, or change directory. There should be a documents here. Say dir. No, actually it's not under documents. We go back one folder up. We're back to Zooks. It actually should be in OneDrive. Then we go to documents. I see this by coming and looking here. We see it's in C drive, users, Zooks, OneDrive, documents, tutorial demos. That's where we want to go. Let's do that. Documents, and then we change the directory to tutorial demos. You notice how it uses double quotes. when the word has spaces in it. Then finally, when we say dir, and there we have it, simple program.java. Here are all the files that we created earlier on, demo.html, a demo file.txt. So now we want to actually compile this simple Java program using the Java-C compiler, which is already installed in my computer. So let's go ahead and do that. Says Java-C, and then we specify the file that we want to compile. Enter. Okay. Now, when we go back to our folder, we notice that there's another file that's actually simpleprogram.class. Now, this is the file that has been compiled by the compiler from the source file. So from here, we use the Java-C compiler to compile this entire program into this file, which contains code that the computer is more able to handle. So let's go back. Let's now use another program called Java in order for us to actually now run or execute our program. So to execute it, we say we're executing this program that's in this class file, but we actually don't say .class when we are executing. We just specify the name, java.simpleprogram. So let's say enter. Would you look at that? I was created using Notepad, which is what we told our little program to do. You've just witnessed a simple Java program. Now, for interest's sake, let's quickly make a slightly more complex program. We're going to create quickly a program that takes in, I'll just quickly, oh no, let me just undo that. I'm going to say, we're going to create a second program. We will call it two numbers. Oh, forget to change that into all. Let's go see. There's our second program, two numbers. So in this program, what we're going to do is we're going to ask the user to specify two numbers, and then we're going to add those numbers. The program is going to add those two numbers and then display the sum of those numbers. So let's do that quickly. Let's see if I can remember. Import java util.scanner. All right, let's do this quickly. I will say scanner c is equal to news scanner system.in, and we'll say okay. Have to tell the person enter first number. Hey, what did I do? And then we will keep the number. I'll just call it, we'll call the variable a. Again, I will not be explaining everything that's happening. That's for later tutorials when we start diving into the actual programming. We're just exploring the compiler for now. So c.next int, and we ask, in fact, I'm just going to copy this. We ask a person for a second number. We'll store that in B. And then we'll say the sum is equal to A plus B. And then we'll print out sum is equal to C. No, it's equal to sum. All right. I'll save that. Again, we cannot directly run this program. This is just the source code where you actually write the program. In order for us to execute this, we have to first use the compiler. So we use the compiler again. Two numbers. Oh, so there's an error in my code. Let's see. Aha. Remember what we said, that the file name has to be similar to what is written here. That's part of like the Java language or the rules of the Java language. So let's change this to two numbers. Save that. So now this was the compiler. While you were compiling, the compiler picked up an error with your code. So let's try that again. Java C 2numbers.java. Now it has been compiled. Let's run it. So if, in fact, before we run it, if we go back, we notice that there is the compiled code. This is what we're actually going to be running, and then the computers will be able to execute our instructions, which have been converted from our source code into that. Let's see, Java numbers. Look at that. Enter first number. Okay, let's say 10. Enter second number. I'll say 5. The sum is equal to 15. So there you have it. We wrote a slightly more complex program compared to our first one, which asks the user for 2 numbers and then tells them what the sum is. Let's run our program again. This time, say 1000, second number 25, sum 125. So now not only have you seen a text editor, which is being used as a source code editor in action, where we write our code, we have also seen a compiler in action, in this case a Java C compiler in action. These are one of two these are one of the many tools that a developer, oh my word, these are one of many tools, what the hell? These are one of many tools that the developer uses in order for, these are one of many tools, that is to say the text editor together with the compiler that the developer would use in order for the developer to create a program. Now, as you could see, we had to keep changing between a couple of tools as we wrote our programs. In our case, text editor, the window explorer, the command prompt. Now, when you consider that this is not all the tools that a developer uses, we should see that it would get a bit inconvenient if we had to say, keep on moving between 5 tools to write our program. It was for this reason that integrated development environments, or IDEs, were created. An IDE is a software that combines all of the different tools that we need to create software into one place. Let's look at what an IDE looks like using one of the ones that I have installed in my computer. The one we'll use is called Intellij. So this is an example of an IDE. I've just created a new project called Hello Project. So let's take that second program that we had created and created here as well. 2 numbers. Okay. Notice first of all how the IDE immediately already writes this for us, because it already knows that in Java you will always have to have this public class, and similar to the file name that you put, that's the name that has to be here. But what we'll do is we'll just simply come and copy this project, copy it, bring it over here and paste it. Now remember what we had to do is that previously we had to first write the file over here, then come over to the command prompt, then use the Java C compiler to compile it, and then use Java to run it. In this case, in this one software, the IDE, we have our source code editor, and on top of that, in order to run this file, you'll notice that there's this green icon over here. If we click on it, it says run 2numbers.main. We click on run, so the IDE automatically does the compiling on our behalf, and lo and behold, it brought up a command prompt in order for us to then interact with the program. So let's do as we did before. Let's say 111, enter second number 25, sum is 136. Let's run it again. You'll notice over here now we could either run it over here or we can click over there to run. So since we haven't changed anything, it doesn't have to compile again. It's running the program. 55 and 5. The sum is 60. So notice how we do not have to leave the IDE in order for us to both develop and also see the program in action. We write the program over here. We run it by simply clicking one button, and then we see the results down over here. So this is the power of the Integrated Development Environment, or the IDE. For our initial tutorials, however, we will not be using an IDE that is as full-blown or as complex as Intellij. For our purposes, we will head over to Google and download an IDE called Notepad. In fact, it's not an IDE actually. We'll download a source code editor which is called Notepad++. If you simply Google Notepad++, the first entry with current version should be what we want. Go over there. You proceed to download this file, the very first file that you see. And when it's done downloading, you simply click on it, allow it to run. English, that's fine. Next, I agree. Allowed to install there in the default location. Just leave the things that are checked as checked. Next, and then you can say create shortcut on desktop if you want for there to be a shortcut on desktop, and then you'll say install. I won't click on install because I already have it installed in my case. As soon as you've installed it, you'll be able to access it in Start or in the desktop shortcut if you put the desktop shortcut over there. So if we open it, we will get this. Now this is similar to, if you remember, Notepad, but Notepad++ is a little bit more advanced. Hence we say it's not just a text editor, it's a source code editor. To demonstrate this, let's look at that very first HTML page that we created at the beginning of our tutorial. Let's open it and see what it looks like when we are using Notepad++. Open. We are looking for documents, tutorial demos, demo.html. Look at this. Compared to, let's open it over here with Notepad. I'll say it should open all files. So look at the difference. As you can see, Notepad again is actually just a text editor that can be used, of course, to write source code, but it doesn't give any context. It can't actually assist you at all in terms of showing you what's what. Whereas over here, amongst the things that Notepad++ can actually do is that it actually highlights, and notice how when you click over here, it highlights the other one. We'll get into this as we start exploring HTML, which we will do in our next following tutorials. When you highlight here, it shows you the corresponding tag. It highlights, showing that this is a attribute, etc. And then on top of that, you notice that you can actually collapse some of the text. Now, of course, this doesn't quite make sense right now, but you can imagine if this thing, let me just show you a quick example. If we had something like, let's say that, and then we had a very, very long program, which a program can end up being like a couple of hundreds of lines. So having the ability to sometimes collapse some of the parts that you are not currently looking at can be very helpful, so that you can only limit, okay, right now I want to focus on this particular piece of code, etc. So the reason why in particular I like using Notepad++, there are similar other source code editors, is because, alright, let me put it this way. The reason why we're going to be using Notepad++ in our initial tutorials is, for one, we don't need all the other aspects when we are dealing with simple web development, whereby we're creating HTML files, JavaScript files, and CSS files. There's no compiling done, and even the interpretation that needs to be done in order for the program to run is done by the browser, which we already have installed. So in other words, since I want us to focus primarily on the code itself, I don't want to use a full-blown IDE so that I don't end up confusing you too much at this point in time. But at the same time, I don't want for us to use the plain Notepad app, as it's not really ideal for creating or writing code. So hence, for our initial tutorials, we'll be settling at this compromise. That's not a full-blown IDE, and at the same time, it's not the plain Notepad. That would make our programming lives extra difficult. And that brings us to the end of our lesson. Next up, we will have our introduction to HTML coding. Later.
You can watch other tutorials over here, and most importantly, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you don't miss out on tutorials as they come out. Have you subscribed? Are you done? Okay, cool.